So picture this, October 2025, an entire government just collapses. But it wasn't a military coup, it wasn't some rival politician, nope. It was a generation of young people who just looked around and said, we've had enough. We're going to dive into this story out of Madagascar because it tells us something really profound about a powerful idea that spread all over the world. And it raises some tough questions for all of us. You know, it's a question every society has to ask itself at some point, right? What's the breaking point? What finally pushes the whole generation too far? What's that one thing that's so fundamental that if you take it away, people will risk absolutely everything to get it back? And for the people of Madagascar, the answer was shockingly simple. It wasn't some complex political ideology. It was water and electricity. Just the basic daily struggle to turn on the tap and get clean water or to flip a switch and have light. I mean, come on, these aren't luxuries. They are the absolute foundation of a dignified life. So here's how it went down. You've got these young people, Gen Z, and they're watching their president, their officials, living these incredibly lavish lives on TV while they can't even get the basics. The frustration just boiled over. So they got on Facebook, on social media, and they organized. And get this, there was no single leader. It was just a collective voice all saying the same thing. We have suffered enough. And just like that, the government fell. Okay, but here's where the story takes a really interesting turn. You have to understand the context here. A staggering 85% of the population in Madagascar is Christian. So in a country that is so deeply defined by its faith, a social crisis this huge, well, it raises a massive question. Yeah, in a nation so deeply Christian, where was the church in all of this? What role did it play? Was it silent? Was it maybe part of the problem? Or was it part of the solution? And answering that question, well, that's what this whole explainer is really about. 1. The church's role, not a judge, but a protector. All right, first up, let's explore the role a church can play in these moments of national crisis, this idea of it being both a protector and a prophet. The Church of Madagascar has this really powerful history. If you look back to 1991 during a clash with the dictatorship, the Council of Christian Churches, the FFKM, was the central mediator. Both sides respected its authority, and it actually helped broker a new constitution peacefully. But fast forward to 2025, and things were totally different. The protest was leaderless, which meant there was no one to bring to the negotiating table. The church couldn't just be a mediator in the middle anymore. It was forced to choose a side. And it did. It chose the side of the people. They released this incredibly powerful statement saying, do not point your guns at these young people. To ask for clean water and electricity is a basic human right. Their anger is justified. Wow. So right there, the church positioned itself not as some neutral party, but as a protector of the vulnerable, defending their right to demand a better life. And that's the first key role. And that stand leads directly to the second role, having what's called a prophetic voice. Now, when we say prophetic in this context, we're not talking about predicting the future like crystal balls or something. No, it means having the moral courage to look at the injustice happening right here, right now in your own society, and just call it out, saying this is wrong. It's all about speaking truth to power in the present moment.
2. The obstacle, the prosperity gospel. So you can see the church has this incredible potential to be a voice for justice, right? But what happens when that voice goes silent? Often, the biggest obstacle isn't some external pressure from the government. It's actually a popular and really powerful teaching that has grown inside the church itself, the prosperity gospel. It actually started in the United States back in the 20th century. From there, it was exported around the world, and it took especially deep root in places where people are really struggling. Places like Madagascar, where folks are just desperately looking for some kind of hope. So what is it exactly? Well, at its core, the message is pretty straightforward. Faith and giving money are basically a transaction with God. The teaching suggests that if you have strong enough faith, and if you give generously to the church, God is going to reward you with financial wealth and good health. You can imagine, for anyone in a desperate situation, that is an incredibly appealing promise. Okay, so here is the absolute crucial point. This hugely popular teaching, this prosperity gospel, is the single biggest obstacle that prevents the church from speaking out against injustice. It silences that prophetic voice. 3 ways the prosperity gospel cripples the church. How does that actually work? How can a message that seems to offer so much hope end up blinding people to the injustices right in front of them? Well, this happens in 3 key ways. 1, it excuses the corrupt. 2, it blames the poor. And 3, it makes faith totally selfish. Let's break down each one. First, it gives corrupt leaders a moral pass. Think about it. If you're teaching that wealth is a sign of God's blessing, what do you do with a politician who gets rich through corruption? Well, inside the logic of the prosperity gospel, they're not seen as a criminal. They're seen as blessed by God. This can lead to a really dangerous situation where the church, instead of holding power accountable, actually ends up looking like it endorses it. A church that preaches wealth is a blessing on Sunday cannot credibly criticize the corrupt wealthy on Monday. Second, this is really a two-sided coin. It blames the poor. If wealth is proof of strong faith, well, what does that make poverty? It becomes proof of weak faith. So instead of telling people, hey, you're poor because the system is broken and the government is stealing money that's meant for you, the message becomes, you're poor because your faith isn't strong enough. You need to pray more. You need to give more. See what happens? It turns totally justified anger at injustice inward into self-blame. This is a false message. Third, the focus of faith becomes completely individualistic. The central question shifts from how do we as a community help the oppressed and fight for justice to how can I get my blessing? How can my family get ahead? Remember, the cry of Gen Z in Madagascar wasn't, I don't have water. It was, we don't have water. It was a community problem. But this theology twists faith into a me problem.
Conclusion. A lesson for all of us. Look, this isn't just a story about Madagascar. It's a really powerful case study, and it holds some incredibly important lessons for communities all over the globe. For the American church, where this theology actually came from, it's time to face a hard truth, that its theological product, when exported, can become a tool that dictators in poor nations use to keep people passive and blind to their own oppression. When materialism becomes the center of our faith, the gospel loses its power. This is also true for other countries like South Korea. Now, the language might be a little different. Maybe it's a focus on blessings or a growth-first mindset where a church's success is just measured by its size and its bank account. But it's the exact same principle at work. It's adopting the world's definition of success instead of a biblical one. And this is the fundamental choice, the core conflict at the heart of all this. On one side, you have the idol of prosperity, which, let's be honest, usually means just following the world's logic of success. This is the biblical idea of salt that has lost its saltiness, basically a faith that's lost its unique purpose. And on the other side, you have the call for justice, which means challenging those very systems and becoming a voice for the voiceless. And that brings us right back to the streets of Madagascar and to the real takeaway from this whole story. When those young people were crying out for justice and for life, I mean, for the very basic human right to have water and electricity, They weren't just making a political demand. Their cry was for the very things that lie at the absolute heart of the gospel message itself. And that leaves all of us with a final and pretty crucial question. In our own communities, in our own time, when the world cries out for justice, where will the church stand? Will it be blinded by its own idols of success? Or will it find its prophetic voice and actually take a stand?
Please consider subscribing and supporting Lagos Community in our mission to spread the gospel. Thank you.